Hello and welcome to another In Conversation with WLV Doctoral College. I'm Dr. Deborah Curison and I work in research development at the University of Wolverhampton.
I'm Dr. Ben Halligan. I'm Director of the Doctoral College.
This is again part of our series about making an application for a research degree, and we're now going to talk about the method section and what's the function of the method section in an application. What are our expectations? How in depth does that need to be? And we're going to talk about how permanent your suggestions are at this stage. So Ben, the function, what is it that the method section needs to show and to tell the reader?
Well, we invite you as part of the application process to talk about the method or the methodology, which is really thinking about your approach to the research. How do you propose to go about doing the research? Which ideas are going to inform the ways in which you do the research? No question, this is a tricky thing to answer. And I don't think we're certainly not expecting a full absolute answer. These things will be changed as the project develops quite normally. Often it can take some time to actually really formally finalize what the methodology is. But at the point of the application, we're inviting you to think about a methodology or possible methodologies, and it will be fine to say, at this point, I think my approach should be in this way, or at this point, there are two possibilities of approaches that I would like to explore as the research develops, and that in and of itself is fine. Some people will be able to actually put the terminology on the methodology. They'll be actually able to say this will be electrodiagnosis of this, that, or the other chemicals, and this is the approach that we've seen in these journal articles talking about these experiments, which I will replicate for this, and that's really fine and really straightforward. Other people might be aware of certain bodies of thought or ideas, a feminist approach to a post-feminist approach to a post-structural approach to the subject matter at hand. Other people, perhaps in the areas of sociology, might be aware of certain critical toolkits that are available. So the ways in which you may construct questionnaires, the ways in which you may invite people to engage in the research that you're doing. So you could say very reasonably the methodology might include data collection. This would include questionnaires, mounting open conversations with subjects, or likewise it may include archival research, and that could very easily be put into the methodology. Likewise, it may involve field research in other countries. It may involve ethnographic excursions into cities, into fields, all these kinds of things. So I think really what I would do is I would just list the kind of ideas, the kind of approaches, and then include them as possible methodological approaches. The final thing would be, I think when we've talked about familiarity with other research, other researchers, other academics, other ideas, it would be fine to say this research is inspired by the work of X or these books or these articles, and I would like to take their approach forward. They describe their approach in this article as this, so this then would be my approach as well. So it would be fine to place yourself in respect to existing methodologies that we're already encountering as we prepare the research proposal.
I think it's useful to look at this from an assessor's point of view as well. So as people who assess applications that come into the university in our areas, what sort of things are you looking for in terms of what's expressed in the application?
I think we're often quite pragmatic. I think often you will get a lot of applications that throw everything into the application. So to return to my idea of interviewing people, you can't interview necessarily thousands and thousands in person. So if it's a matter of needing to talk to thousands, how would we perhaps go about this through online questionnaires, that kind of thing? It may not be necessary to look at the evolution of something across 50 years, but across 10 years may be possible. So we're kind of thinking pragmatically what can be done within the timeline of the PhD, and focusing in, whittling down, doing something that we can break into blocks of 2, 3, 4 months and then set that going, and that would represent sufficient depth of research of a PhD level for a PhD to be awarded. So often those conversations that begin at the point of the application and then carry through, into the first year, are all about focusing in. So where we have a methodology that seems really tough, I would travel to these 8 countries, I would look at these enormous archives. I think that can slightly scare the horses. So a kind of pragmatic modesty, practicality in terms of what can be done written into the methodology.
I think we come from 2 different discipline areas, don't we, Ben? So for me, I'm that intersection between education, health and well-being from a psychological perspective. So for me, I'm kind of looking for things along the lines of knowing who people are going to talk to. I'm not necessarily concerned that they are going to be able to articulate what questions they're going to ask people, or what a type, what philosophical underpinnings might be applied to the way that interview is going to be carried out, or technique that they're going to use. I'm more interested in, as you say, the pragmatics. It might be an interview, or it might be a particular approach to data collection, such as Q-sort or repertory grid, and understanding the practicalities of that. So as you say, you're not going to be able to interview thousands of people, but you might interview 25 undergraduate psychology students, or 13 nursing students, for instance. So it isn't necessarily being able to fully articulate your ontological, epistemological positions, your philosophical underpinnings, but kind of knowing basically how you'd like to carry that research out.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think that it's a useful exercise, because it begins to make you probe a little bit further the idea you're proposing, and how can we prove this? How can we disprove this? What level of engagement with external bodies or factors are we going to need? Or, if this is none of that, and it's kind of almost, as it were, library or reading based, are we looking at every novel written by this author, or just a couple of key ones? Are we looking at, all this data we can find around diplomatic communications, or are we just looking at certain years, certain moments for a history PhD? So yeah, it does raise some useful questions, but I think those questions are raised for you and as part of the application process for the people who are supporting you. So I wouldn't worry so much about being settled, and I think it's enough to make a couple of suggestions to say, at the stage of the application, I am considering a number of methodological approaches. It could be this, or it could be that, and I look forward to engaging in further conversation as the research project develops to define these. So yeah, so we're asking for a kind of first attempt at nailing down a methodology, and we accept this is quite difficult.
I think this very nicely segues into the next area that we're going to cover, and it's about how permanent is the suggestions you make at application. And I think it suffices to say that that can change, and often does change as people start to read about the way in which research is conducted. And one of the ways in which research might make a contribution to knowledge is utilising methodologies that have been used in other areas in the area that you're working in, making an introduction of that approach within your discipline, in your area. So whilst you may well start off in your application saying you are going to do X and do that in your research degree, just as often people start off saying they're going to do this and end up tweaking that in some way, or completely changing that in an as they go through their literature review and they start to read what has been done and how things have been done, and start to look at how that could be done differently, and how by doing that you're starting to look at things through a different lens.
Yeah, absolutely. I think almost everybody would go through that process, and therefore I think you can be free to be a bit speculative, and to know that you're not necessarily really going to be held to what you say at this point in terms of the methodology that will be developed. And I think between the initial proposal and then writing up and completing the PhD, there really will be substantial differences, and that's fine. We absolutely understand that. We can accommodate that. I guess the limit though would be that if we do accept you into a certain area, we kind of need you to stick in that area rather than sidestep into another discipline altogether. And so really we're after a kind of more of a general indication and details to follow at this point, and I think that includes pretty much every aspect of what will go into the application.
That's a good point to end on. So thank you, Ben, and thank you for listening. And as always, it's brilliant to talk to you, and we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Oh, yeah.